Hi, welcome back. In this video, I'd like to just give a pause because it's very important when we start this that we just linger a little bit more on the concepts. Now, in that last video, I mentioned things like variables, assignment operators in passing, but our purpose in the previous video was just to show you how it fits together so you can attempt to code it. So what I'd like to do in this very short video is just talk about some of the concepts and what they are. The first thing to say is that every line of a program is called a statement. You'll notice the language will talk about a statement, a single line, and you'll notice that's a kind of language thing that we do, right? Now, there is one element of that video that I thought I rushed very, very quickly, and that was the introduction to this word variable. Now, a variable is really all about storing data in memory. Okay, so whenever you see this word variable, think of it like a little place in memory in which you pop pieces of data in, right? You can add to it, you can remove it, you can clear it out, but think of it like a little place. And I often, when I have introductory sessions, draw a kind of bucket shape to sort of indicate. So if you imagine in our program, we have a kilos variable and we have a pounds variable. So the user passes in a value. So they throw in, say, the value, they input that, number 1. So that's now stored in the kilos variable, right? So it's like a little container. We then multiply that value by 2.2, and then we store the result over here in the pounds, and that will store the value 2.2. So variables are the way that you manipulate data inside your program, and incredibly important. You always have to give them a name or a label. In Python, it's quite useful to give them names that make sense. That's quite crucial. Okay, so don't skimp on the names. Use words throughout the semester, especially if you're new. You want the code to be clear enough for you to understand what's going on, right? So next, really, is a concept I leapt through in the previous video, and that video talked about the equal sign. Now, we call the equal sign an assignment operator. Now that's a long-winded way, and you might say, why can't you just call it the equal sign? And I say to you, well, because it sort of does something different. It's part of a process. If you remember the previous video, I said to you, look at what happens on the right-hand side of this operator. Okay, then look at what's on the left-hand side of this operator. It's a very, very important way of understanding how code works. The right-hand side always goes first. So that's always your first step. Step 2 and step 3. So think of it like this. Let's break it down. This operator isn't just an equal sign. If it was an equal sign, it would say that what's on this side is the same as what's on that side, etc., etc., right? And it's more complicated, obviously. It's an operator. It's a part of a process. So what it does actually is it says, whatever's going on this right-hand side, whatever code you've got here, you do that first. Okay? The equal sign gets shoved here, and the result of this process, say it's a calculation, which it is in our case, and it works out a value. You want to store that somewhere. You want to put that somewhere. Think of this as a place, as a process of putting whatever the result of the right-hand side over here on the left-hand side and storing it in here. So it's more than just an equal sign. Okay? You will find as you go through it, as you go through programming, how important it is to not confuse it with just a straightforward equal sign. So, you know, A equals 1. right? That's an equal sign. 1 equals A, right, in maths. But actually, if that was a piece of programming, what it does is it says that value on the right-hand side is stored in that variable. And variables, just to go back a second, variables always use names, okay, or words or letters. So what this does, if this was in programming, is it says that value 1, store it in this variable over here. Okay, so that's a slightly different concept to an equal sign. Let's just very briefly talk about numeric values, number values. And in the program, you'll notice we have literally the number 2.2 appearing all through your code. You also have string values. Strings are things that appear between speech marks, right? They could be hello, da 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 dum. So watch out for those in your programming. If you want to put a prompt up for the user and you use a print statement, you always have a bracket, because the bracket says whatever goes inside the bracket is what you're going to print. If you use speech marks and say hi, close the speech mark, it'll put everything in there on the screen. Okay, so let's also look a little bit further, just to break down what we did in the previous one. We had this type of statement. We had pounds equals 2.2, multiplication is an asterisk, remember that, kilos. So again, remember the rule, this is an assignment operator, not an equal sign. What it's saying is do the stuff on the right hand side, 2.2 times whatever value is being held in kilos. Kilos is a box, which whatever you inputted, right, it would be sitting over here. Multiply it, do that stuff, equal sign says then put the result over here into pounds. So pounds is another variable, like a little bucket or a box in memory, and it will store the result in there, 2.2. Okay, this is an arithmetic expression, 2.2 times. You know, it's basic maths, if you like. We also have, in that last simple example, and the last point here, is we have something called built-in functions. And I'll stop on this before we move on to the next one. Built-in functions are these words like float. So what I'll do is I'll just write them out, and you have the word input. They were the two that appeared. Okay, so the basic logic of a function in programming always looks, well, it works like this. That's the name of the function, right? And although I said it was a type of number, I'm trying to be not overcomplicated early on. This bracket is what you pass your function. So think of this bracket as your input to the function. The output, you often stick an equal sign over there, will be put over there on the left hand side of the assignment operator. Okay, so have a look at the input value, input one here. That's your input. Strictly in the word input, this gets a little bit confusing. Inside the bracket is not what you input. For this is the exception and gets a little bit complicated. Whenever you have the input value, this is your prompt. Whatever you put inside the bracket in speech marks is what will appear on screen. What you actually type in will be taken by this function and assigned to whatever value you've put over here. It's a little bit different, so I want to be careful I don't confuse the issue. Okay, so what you're going to find, and then the favorite is the print. And the print is great because what you pass it here inside the bracket, it will pop on screen. So notice the pattern of these built-in functions. These built-in functions are given to you. You don't have to create them yourself. You have a bracket after the name of the function where you pass it something. And depending on the type of function you have, it does something different with what's passed. That's enough for this particular moment before we move into your further code.